those who included members for various sections throughout those communities. And basically, every 18 months, there was or they assigned a new planner. So at all times, there was one person with at least 18 months of experience being a planner. So what actually ended up happening was that the way that the government worked was that they started talking a lot more to the community and really getting feedback, and it eventually became that the planners kind of lost a lot of the authority that they had, where everybody kind of made the decision equally. So here they moved on to a system of direct democracy, where every single member of the community had a direct say in exactly what happened. And of course, there were three assumptions that came in with the direct democracy. The assumption that the majority of the group would make a better decision, that it's nearly impossible for all members of the group to agree on the decision, and the participants in democratic form of government would be more likely to help implement and follow decisions made by a majority. Now, problem with this was that pretty much all three of these assumptions caused problems for the community. So the first one is that the majority of the group would make a better decision. This wasn't necessarily true. Like, I'm sure that we all know this, that just because large group or the majority of a group of people made a decision doesn't necessarily make it true. And B, it's nearly impossible for all members to agree on the decision. They found later on that it is possible for all members to come to agreement for a decision, and the fact that if all members come to an agreement, then it's much better for the community. And then C, participants in democratic form of government would help implement and follow the decisions. This also was false, just because what democracy kind of created was this kind of adversarial group where people kind of butted heads and kind of fought against each other, because people started working more on, or focused more on the vote rather than creating or making the correct decision. So this created a lot of
familiar.
yeah. So this created a lot of problems for Los Horcones. So as a as a perfect utopia that they're trying to create, this wasn't anywhere near what they wanted. So they created something called the personalized system of government. Now this has a ton of key aspects. It takes up 2 whole slides. But basically, what they ended up doing was that they wanted to create a community where everybody had a direct say in exactly what was happening. So all members of the community were, I guess, were promoted to go and participate in the local government. And then to facilitate this, they had various like classes, various demonstrations, where they basically made it so that as people grew up, they grew up participating in this community. And what was so special and different about this was that because every decision needed consensus by everybody, so everybody had to agree on the decision. So the way that they did this was, let's say that they had an issue, and if any one person in the community had a problem with a decision they were making, they could stop moving right there, go back to the drawing board, and rework the decision. And in this way, they just kept them reworking decisions over and over and over until everybody in the community was happy. And they believed that doing this created a much stronger government and created better solutions. So these are just a quick list of advantages. Encourages all members to participate, increases productivity and improving interpersonal relationships. Promotes a lot of the values that Los Horcones really that they valued, which was mostly equality, cooperation, and experimentalism, and then it sustains their attempt to become economically self-sufficient.
So behavioral code is a list of behavioral objectives, and it defines the basis of like what behavior is expected in this community. And there are separate codes for young members, and parents is a trained childcare worker, and also for adults. And there are lots of like specific behavior, like 154 specific behaviors, which covers every aspect of life, everyday life. And if there's new members who wanna join this community, they have to first read the code and then discuss with the behavior manager if they can live with it. And the behavior manager wants to ensure that the new members accept the code. And if there's a behavior of new member which is not desirable or against the code, first they are informed that it's not really desirable in this community, and they were assured that they're gonna have the help and support to change the behavior. But then if the person doesn't want to accept the community's proposal, then he or she will be asked to leave the community. This is really strict, so probably this strict code and need for compliance might have made slow down the growth of those Horcones inside. But people wanted more quality rather than quantity of the community.
Slide in here. So the children at Los Horcones received something remotely comparable to Skinner's ethical training. They are taught communitarian behavior and also the techniques and theories involved in the process. So they really focused on reinforcing self-control, and then they also offered self-management programs to all of the members of the community there. And these were in order to tackle particular behavioral problems that a member may wish to change. So the behavior was monitored, and they went through these steps in order so that that member would, by the end of this self-management program, would be able to efficiently change the behavior. So children were also perceived to be little experts because they were also being taught these behavioral theories and things like that too. So children were also very involved in the self-management programs. And then they really tried to have it so that reinforcers were intrinsically or naturally reinforcing rather than giving them something like a candy or like the lollipop case. The educational system that they used was called the personalized system of instruction, and this system allowed so that the students were able to work at their own pace, and they were able to like maneuver through their workload so they were able to maneuver with their workload independently from the teacher and from the fixed study time schedules. And they would also view studying as reinforcing, so they would view it as pleasant. And just to like say that they also always passed the Mexican state exams with ease, so it's not like it didn't work. And then education for autistic children is something that Los Horcones really focused on. And one of the things that they did, in addition to in the treatment of autistic children, was that they concentrated on modifying the children's behavior rather than the reasons why they were doing these things. So they made sure that the environment that they were placed in was something that would be able to be predictable, simple, and unthreatening as possible. But the autistic children also had to learn that it was okay to necessarily be made fun of, which I don't know if y'all agree, but this would just be to promote so that they were be able to fit in this environment, like to learn the social sorry, I'm losing it. To learn that so that all this is designed to help the children gain confidence in dealing with his or her environment and most socially acceptable behavior, as much as the treatment somewhat resembled the ethical training of children in Waltham too.
Okay, there was an interview conducted in 1999 with the person who grew up in this community. He was the first child at Los Horcones, and when he was born, there were only 6 adult members, and they were living 26 acres land. And according to him, they were biological and behavior parents, and every adult was basically required to study children's education and study how to apply behavioral principles to improve the growth of children. And there's no difference in how close the child was to the biological parent and also to behavior parents. So everybody was basically parents for every kid. And there was children's house, so children all slept separately from adults, and they treated each other as brothers and sisters, regardless of how actually they're related or not. And they shared everything like clothes, toys. There's no private possessions. They were taught to say, not my puzzle, but the puzzle I'm using. And this person was actually saying that when he was little, he actually said, the hand that I'm using instead of my prohibited word. And according to him, he really liked the communitarian family because it's more like loving environment, and he felt safe, and it was crimeless. Everybody was willing to teach kids whatever they're doing. So learning happened all day long, and in all settings, not in school settings. There's no fixed schedule, and children could learn whatever they wanted and whenever they wanted. And there's no vacation because there's no fixed schedule. So school or learning was year round, or all the basically 24/7 it was learning. And second generation, according to scholars, community like this usually doesn't really last because the second generation is not really committed as much as the first generation. But he answered that they're committed to the community as much as their parents, and they all wanted to keep living there.
And then some of the similarities as compared to Skinner's Walden 2 was that the community was perceived as this utopian vision. So they really used the Walden 2 framework to make their own little community. So even though they were an experimentally social design, they were at the same time giving the impression of a very authoritarian and closed society. And then some of the similarities was that, once again, the adults were seen as parents to all of the children. And then this was one of the theoretical things that Skinner proposed with his community love.
And the difference is the ordinary members of Walden 2, they're portrayed as incapable of understanding the concept of behaviorism, while in Los Horcones, people, they have capability of understanding behaviorism, and they understand why they're being sort of controlled for the good. And where Skinner advocated government for the people, in Los Horcones, it's more by the people. And the educational process is in Walden 2, it's more to condition people, but in Los Horcones, it's more like to educate the people. And the atmosphere is more loving. There's no such a thing like wearing lollipops and they can't eat. It's more warm and loving environment. But there's a sizing difference. Walden 2 is, it said it's about 1,000 people living, but here, I think it was really small community, because when the person who got interviewed, when he was 9 years old, he only had 8 siblings. That means there are only 8 kids in total. And adults who initiated was only 6 people. So definitely much smaller community than Walden 2.
And then just to finalize, the perceived success of Los Horcones was that, as Coleman states in his Living Walden 2 book, is that Los Horcones is the achievement of a group of individuals, not necessarily the science. At least that's what he states, because he believes that their Mexican background and also like their Catholic background also kind of helped to foster that sense of community and made it much more easy for the community members to follow this ideal, like Walden 2 example. And essentially Los Horcones, the last time we contacted them, we tried and they didn't contact us back, so we're assuming that they don't exist anymore. Or that's who.
Yeah, that's Thank you for
Going back to the personality system of government, and you know how you were saying that they all had to agree on decisions. Wouldn't that take a long time to make changes in something that needed to be done immediately, or was it that people were in agreement usually?
Well, with the personal system government, they focused on long-range problems, so they really planned for problems ahead. That way, when if something drastic came up, they already had a solution for it. And they had like that. Like when I was doing that, FSL is one of the problems that if everybody come to a solution, then it would take quite a long time. But they facilitated this by always announcing meetings ahead of time and planning meetings at times where everybody was available. So everybody was able to make those meetings and really go down and discuss it. But if you really wanted to bring this to a larger community, it would be a lot harder just because to have everybody, like even if you feel this entire class would come to agreement with something, it would be really, really hard.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that the community was, I know in the beginning that you guys mentioned that it was only a few people, but I'm assuming that even going on through time, it's not like a